Now today we also confer an honorary degree upon the Honorable Elizabeth Dowdeswell, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, in recognition of her appointment as Lieutenant Governor of Ontario and to honor her in her capacity as official visitor to this university. I am delighted to welcome Her Honor to this convocation and to present our distinguished candidate. I will now call on Dr. David Sylvester, Principal of King's University College.
The Honorable Elizabeth Dowdeswell, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. In many ways, our celebration today is an official recognition that you, our graduates, are now called to leadership in a crucially important conversation, one that touches on the well-being of our city, our province, and the very future of democracy in our country. While the King's curriculum ranges from social work through the social sciences, it is infused throughout with the principles of the liberal arts. At King's, we teach business and history, and we teach psychology, philosophy, and political science, and many other disciplines. And we teach these very well. But first and foremost, what we do is teach people. Our real goal is to educate women and men who are not only competent in their discipline and prepared to take on a lifetime of career challenges, but who are also compassionate and creative citizens. This form of education has been designed and tested over millennia and 60 years at King's to provide you with the tools, the imagination, and the courage to participate fully in this conversation of what it means to be a human being and how our immediate communities are shaped by our willingness and ability to engage in this great project called civil society. That is why it's most appropriate that graduating with you today is a woman who is a true champion of this conversation, Her Honor Elizabeth Dowdeswell, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. Lieutenant Governor Dowdeswell is an inspiring leader who has for many decades embodied the noble commitment to serve the common good. And she has dedicated her current efforts to facilitating the very public conversation of what it means to be a citizen of our province and our country. In her words, Her Honor has set out to make her office, quote, a crucible of ideas, inviting us to bring multiple perspectives to the table, to encourage innovation, and to cultivate new ideas, sparking action and commitment to seeing these ideas move forward, close quote. In these few words, Her Honor has captured the very purpose of the university and the specific goals of the liberal arts education you have enjoyed at King's, namely, to invite and cultivate new ways of thinking and to develop these ideas in the service of society. As you might expect, Lieutenant Governor Dowdeswell's invitation and challenge to all of us is backstopped by her own long and distinguished record of leadership in public service. Born in Northern Ireland, she immigrated to Canada with her family at the age of 3. For those of you who are worried about what job you might hold after graduation, fasten your seatbelts and imagine what might await you as I provide you with just a few highlights from Her Honor's distinguished career. After her own graduation, Elizabeth Dowdeswell became a high school teacher in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, so by definition, she's a good person. She first entered public service as the Deputy Minister of Culture in Saskatchewan, and then as the Assistant Deputy Minister at Environment Canada. She has been the head of the Meteorological Service of Canada, the head of the United Nations Environment Program in Kenya, the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, and the founder and CEO of the Nuclear Waste Management Organization in Canada. From 2010 until the time of her appointment as our Lieutenant Governor in 2014, the Honourable Elizabeth Dowdeswell served as President and CEO of the Council of Canadian Academies. In recognition of this service and her work as a catalyst for a forward-thinking public discourse, Lieutenant Governor Dowdeswell has received many accolades and awards. She has previously received 10 honorary degrees and the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. She has served as a colonel of the Regiment of the Queen's York Rangers and is an honorary commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police. And she is a member of the Chancellor of the Order of Ontario and an officer of the Order of Canada. It is indeed a privilege for us to share this platform and this day with this compassionate and creative woman who for many decades has served our province and our country and challenged us all to engage in informed and creative dialogue for the betterment of society. Mr. Chancellor, on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and in the name of the Senate, I am delighted to ask you to confer the degree of Doctors of Laws, honoris causa, upon a truly great Canadian and esteemed member of the Western University class of 2015, our Lieutenant Governor, the Honourable Elizabeth Dowdeswell.
By virtue of the authority vested in me as Chancellor, I admit you to the degree Doctor of Laws, Jure Dignitatis. Congratulations, Your Honor. On behalf of all assembled here today, I should now like to invite our newest alumna, the Honorable Dr. Elizabeth Dowdeswell, to address Convocation.
Mr. Chancellor, Mr. President, graduates, family, and guests. What a wonderful sight in front of me. It's amazing. I'm both honored and humbled to be standing before you today. Thank you. Recognition by one's peers has no equal, and recognition from this institution is very special. This university has pursued academic excellence and nourished the soul, while contributing and embracing the imperative to live in harmony with its community, both near and far. In particular, the mission to social justice is certainly to be applauded. But today is not only my celebration, it's yours, and nothing should diminish your pride and that of your families in accomplishing this milestone. It's such a genuine privilege to share this day with each and every one of you. Convocations are time for reflection, and one could be quite pessimistic about the state of the world in which you are about to play a more prominent role. For this is a time of blurring sovereignty, blinding technological change, integrated economies, and growing alienation between people's passions and political processes. We generally think of peace as freedom from war, but we're not at peace if there isn't enough food to eat, if there's inadequate shelter, if people are sick and cannot get medical care, if they are impoverished and cannot hope to escape poverty's grips. In these terms, millions of our fellow humans on this planet cannot be said to be at peace. And the jury is still out on how to avoid a collision between growing ecological pressures, economic expansion, and significant challenges to social cohesion. This past week certainly reminded us of our current challenges. Who could not be profoundly influenced by the release of the report of the Commission on Truth and Reconciliation. It must give us pause. It demonstrates in such a compelling way the fallout from how we humans relate to each other and to the environments in which we live. There's a quest for some set of shared values that can transcend our differences and help bring people together to foster more collaboration and less conflict. For our responsibility as citizens means being accountable to all. Injustice to one is injustice to all. But the message of the report was also one of hope. And hope begins when we have a willingness to change. We can make things better. We can aspire to a more just and sustainable world, to global wellness. I remain eternally optimistic because ordinary people, united in common cause, whether it be protecting the environment, eliminating barriers for women, or eradicating poverty, one by one, those people together can do extraordinary things. You know, when you think about whether or not one person can make a difference, I'm often reminded of an African saying, if you ever think you're too small to make a difference, you've never spent the night with a mosquito. It is imperative that we are not disinterested, just mere observers of the changes taking place around us. I've been so fortunate in my career, and with some trepidation, I want to share 3 lessons that I've learned from a life that has just been so full of paths of possibility and continues to be very much a work in progress. The first advice I would give is to learn to expect the unexpected. There is no simple set of instructions on how to proceed in these turbulent times, and perhaps the most useful advice, after all, is to be open to all possibilities and to develop resilience. One of the things about which I have absolutely no regrets has been the variety of work in which I've been engaged. Most of my working life, I've been asked questions like, what on earth is a home economist doing managing Canada's weather service? I didn't have it all figured out at the beginning, and perhaps the answer really lies in being curious and being prepared to take risks. The real truth is that the only ending to your story is the one you make up yourself. I would never have predicted the places I've been around the world, the roles I've played. But I dare to suggest that you'll often feel outside your comfort zone in the years ahead. If you're to grasp the promise and the potential, perhaps it's worth remembering that often the walls that we have to scale are most often the walls within our own minds. The second piece of advice would be to stand on the cracks in between. Now that may surprise you, coming as it does at the conclusion of several years of focused and specialized studies. But you know, the English philosopher Bertrand Russell used to tell a story about his visit to China in the 1920s. He was greatly taken by the country, and so he asked the president of China's leading university if he could apply for a faculty job. Well, the president, of course, was just delighted and asked him whether he was principally a mathematician or principally a philosopher. Russell thought about it and finally said that he was neither, as he was interested in the dialogue between the two disciplines. The president slowly shook his head and said, "Sorry, you can either be a mathematician or a philosopher, but you can't stand on the cracks in between." Well, the problem, as Russell pointed out, is that standing on the cracks is where all the action is. And certainly my experience has convinced me that almost all of the problems of our time are problems at new interfaces, or problems that take place because of a lack of integration in our thinking. For example, the environmental problems we face are not simply scientific or technological. They're political, social, and economic, and they can't be understood within the fragmented methodologies, that are characteristic of our academic disciplines or our neatly separate government departments. Unexpectedly, a few years ago, I found myself leading a corporation charged with finding an approach to managing Canada's high-level nuclear waste, an issue that embodies scientific complexity, inspires fear and insecurity, demands discussion of trade-offs, polarizes citizens, raises questions of intergenerational equity. Effectively, we were being asked to develop public policy for a period longer than recorded history. Just a little bit humbling. But clearly, we could not simply find the best technical response, because while scientists and specialists can articulate the nature of risk and suggest ways in which that risk might be mitigated, it's really society that will ultimately decide what risks they're prepared to accept. Science may tell us what we can do. Ethics points to what we must. We are on the verge of a powerful new wave of health-related life sciences, with its capacity to recreate nature and even change what it means to be human. Science and technology are forcing us to confront moral dilemmas and profound choices that are going to require deeper global dialogue and greater systemic thinking than we've ever before been challenged to do. And third and finally, the last piece of advice, to know when you've been blessed. My own life has been shaped by being raised as a child of the manse in communities that developed resilience and social consciousness. And my worldview has very much been informed by the perspective of working for the United Nations, the oneness of the human family. My experience with the UN, particularly managing the headquarters in Nairobi, Kenya, called into question my most basic assumptions about people and organizations. There was absolutely nothing in small-town Saskatchewan that prepared me for the experience in Kenya of seeing my senior staff senselessly murdered or mothers taking children to school being carjacked. It exposed both corruption and disregard for human life. But all around the world, I've also seen inspiring examples. At a conference on reconciliation and community building in Northern Ireland, signs throughout the city read, "Way ahead, not closed." I brought one of those signs home, and it has for many years held pride of place in my office. Way ahead, not closed. I saw an audience of adults reduced to tears listening to compelling stories of courage from young people in war-torn areas. And I don't have time today to tell you all of those stories, but I can tell you what was so impressive was not the sadness of absolutely horrific tales, but the maturity and commitment, and at times even joy, as each, one young women and men, sought in their own way to make a difference in this world. I was also witness to the contributions of Canadians, your fellow Canadians, their service to the international community, their commitment to social justice, their sense of responsibility, generosity, and tolerance, and it made me proud. And in this privileged new role as Ontario's 29th Lieutenant Governor, I can tell you already, after some 400 events, that the people of Ontario inspire me, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We Canadians have really been blessed. Our wealth of natural resources, our relative stability, and our respect for each other as human beings